And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I don't know if I could say that the dust has settled, but it
Not
feels
even
like
remotely close.
I just feel like I've had a little bit of time to ruminate and to digest what came out earlier today. I know that I'm already looking ahead, but I can't wait until tomorrow's show because I really want to preview these matchups. It feels really, really odd having this many teams in, but there's just been so much happened since yesterday and this morning. It has been a crazy 12 hours.
Well, in 2 weeks, you'll have the Battle of Indiana, kind of like, going for the Battle of the Bastards of Winterfell. It's what it feels like there. You have Penn State and SM. Hold on.
I don't get that reference, but I understand.
Okay.
I vaguely understand it.
It's the best Games of Thrones episode ever.
Okay.
Like, literally. I'm not saying anything bad.
Okay.
You'll have Penn State and SMU, blah. Texas and Clemson. By the way, Joe, I don't know if you saw this. Clemson fans coming after you, boy. They really think that they can take down Texas in a couple of weeks.
Huh? Wait,
Yeah.
really?
Oh, yes.
Based off of what logic?
I don't know. I don't, because Texas didn't. Here's the logic. Texas hasn't been a ranked team.
Okay, so Clemson fans, Texas doesn't have a really premier win that you would expect for a top 10 team.
Neither does Clemson.
No, but what I was going to say is Clemson's the type of team that Texas smokes. Clemson is closer to Texas A&M than Clemson is to Texas. So they're going to kick the shit out of them. The game's not going to be close.
It would be funny, Joe, if Clemson and Texas had a common opponent that they had on their schedule. Huh. Oh, wait. They do. One went into overtime and the other one got blown out.
That was week one, but I agree with you.
If only. Anyway, and then you'll have Ohio State and Tennessee. When we get to the Big Ten, we'll talk about Oregon, and we'll talk about Oregon a lot here tonight. I'm going stupid. Now, you talked about ruminating over this. The Big Ten got screwed. The Big Ten completely got screwed. So the two best teams, their two best teams, are going to have to play each other in round two. It's stupid. Absolutely, positively stupid. So I'm sure we'll talk about that. But the big thing that we'll talk about here, Joe, we'll go through each of the P4, the reputable conference championships. Joe will react to those. The SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Big 12. Any thoughts on what you saw from Boise State and UNLV? I know we're not really breaking that down, but any thoughts that you saw on that game?
Yeah, not enough people are talking about the fact that Boise State didn't score any points in the second half. I'm supposed to be impressed. I still, and I know that we already gave
Barry Odom going to Purdue.
Well, I'm kind of shocked that Barry Odom wouldn't have gone for a bigger job than that. I just don't know how much you can really win at Purdue. But to what you just asked really quickly about the Mountain West Championship game, I understand that we gave out our reaction and our breakdown on the bracket. I'm still a bit disenfranchised by the fact that Boise is ranked ahead of Arizona State. That is such a very nitpicky thing for me, but I don't know how I'm going to pick Boise, who didn't score in the second half, only put up 21 points at home against UNLV, a G5 team, and Arizona State blanks Iowa State, and that doesn't mean more. That doesn't it's not something that's more credible.
Y'all wanted this playoff format. That's all I'm going to say here. Y'all wanted it. Now you got it. Elk says Bama AD Greg Braun says that they need to consider their out-of-conference games from now on after playing, checks notes, Mercer, USF, Western Kentucky, and Wisconsin. Well, when they went after Wisconsin and they got Wisconsin was in a Big Ten title game.
That's fair.
It's the same thing with Texas and Michigan. I mean, you can't penalize like Elks. I'll throw one at you. LSU and Ohio State play in 4 or 5 years. What if LSU's down? There's a lot of things that can happen here. It's not Greg Braun saying about Basically, what he's trying to say is, what is the luxury of teams playing tough out of conference if it's not going to benefit them?
My issue with what he said is I don't think he understands. It's not that he doesn't understand. I think that the real key factor in this has less to do with the out-of-conference scheduling, because to this point of what Elks brought up, and there was the community note on Twitter to his statement. He actually, I would argue, this is a pretty nice out-of-conference schedule because you get a very easily beatable Power 4 team and an FCS team and a G5 team. The initiative, I think, actually maybe needs to be from Sankey is schedule less in-conference SEC games. I know that's like an absurd.
Remember last year when our good buddies over at Fox were screaming to the top of their lungs saying that the SEC needed to go to 9 conference games?
Well, maybe they need to go to 7. Like, in all seriousness, imagine if they went to 7 and then they scheduled another cupcake. Like, they would be having the same level of competition as the ACC.
Nobody's going to excuse the SEC. Nobody outside the SEC, and even people inside the SEC, hate other teams inside the SEC, so they're not going to pile on.
No.
Now, today I got pretty much labeled as a homer of the SEC. But to finalize this and not to scream for theatrics or views or anything which we got labeled for, the bottom line is I agree with the greatest head coach of all time. Now, I've been saying this for a month, so it's not like I'm just stealing his thought. I agree with what Kirby said. It's not created equally. It's not. And I think when I look at Ohio State as an example, okay, what if there were a lot of 2-loss teams and we look and say, well, Ohio State's got a bad Michigan loss. Okay, so let's stop right there. Well, they did beat Penn State. So I look at Bama and everybody wanting to look, the Oklahoma and the
Vanderbilt.
The Vandy losses are very bad. Non-excusable. They're not excusable. But when I look at Arizona State as an example that lost to Cincy, I don't care about their quarterback at the current moment. Like, when I look at their loss to BYU, it's not created equally. Y'all know, and I know it's not.
Wait, Arizona State didn't play BYU. You mean their other?
No, they did play BYU, but they beat them.
They beat them. But
I'm talking about SMU beating BYU. That's not created equally. Like, I think it's very bad, and I'm being serious here. I think it's so bad for our sport that we basically today threw out strength of schedule.
Someone put out, and I wish I had bookmarked it. Somebody had put out what the bracket would have looked like if the buys were set on who the top 4 teams were. And I got to be honest, I mean, it was perfect. Albeit that Arizona State and Boise State were still in it, and Clemson were still in it, but it was so dumb how simple and easy it looked for all of the matchups, and there really couldn't have been any arguments for or against it. Even Alabama still getting pushed out in that circumstance. But
I don't care if it's Bama.
I know.
I don't care.
Well, right, you have no reason to support Bama. You're an LSU.
No, I have zero reason.
All I'm just reiterating here is that I don't mind that if you win your conference, that lets you compete in the playoff field. But if your team has 3 losses or you're playing mediocre competition, you should be in the bottom 3 seeds of the entire bracket. This is where I think the biggest frustration comes from me, especially from you, and from a lot of people. And I think a lot of media folks agree with us. I think a lot of people are on the same page. I don't think anyone thinks this is a good model the way that it's set up.
But all of them were out there screaming SMU over Bama,
that's a separate issue.
Which is you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Then you really are. You can't say that this is BS on how it's set up and say that SMU went 5 weeks without playing a team that was above 500. Now hold on now. What if anybody in the SEC? Y'all did it, so stay with me. What if anybody in the SEC went 5 straight weeks with playing someone over 500? What would happen?
Well, didn't I don't know what Texas's exact
no,
stretch was.
Texas didn't do it.
Yeah. It's a good point, but that doesn't exist. That data point doesn't exist.
It does exist. Can I tell you what conference it exists in?
Well, I was saying it doesn't exist in the SEC, but what conference does it exist in?
None of them.
Okay, so wait, what's your point?
Hold on. It does exist in the SEC. Teams are always playing within a month span somebody that's above 500. Joe, I mean, literally, there's not a space where you can say that's true. It's non-existent. So when I look at Indiana and it happened for 5, 6, then almost it didn't, but almost 7 straight weeks. I mean, it's a big difference. It's a massive difference. Again, it's just not created equally. So you can think I'm clamoring for Bama. Listen, Bama getting in gives them $20 million against a school that I root for and cover. I don't want them to win. But there comes a point in time where I'm not going to rest on my laurels, or as some would say, or not talk about them in the true light. It's stupid. It's literally stupid. I don't get it. So there's my spiel. We got a lot of super chats in here. I don't know.
Thank you guys. No, let's throw them really quickly because I doubt we'll get more than these.
Fravel says, I don't get why you guys didn't give Notre Dame a shot over Georgia. Notre Dame matched up perfectly with Georgia. The key to beating Georgia is doing what Georgia Tech and UMass both rushed for over 200 yards.
I think Georgia wins that game, but I've given them a shot. I mean, we just didn't dive into it. I think we're going to dive into it a lot more tomorrow and actually previewing it. So I don't want to appreciate the super chat, but I don't think we're going to
beat Indiana.
Yeah, let's focus on beating Indiana first, which is I think the biggest part about this. But you're right. Notre Dame is built if they play a similar game plan to what Georgia Tech did, and Riley Leonard needs to go Haynes King. Like, he needs to play exactly like Haynes King did. That's what's required of them to win. That 1,000% is. I would argue that they are defensively a little stouter than Georgia Tech, that they could actually finish if that thing went into overtime. Then Notre Dame could have won a game like that. It all comes down to what the heck's happening with Carson Beck, though, because that's going to be a huge talking point.
The problem that I have in the Georgia Notre Dame thing that I said I was going to wait for the show, you're giving Kirby an extra week to prepare for you than what you have for him.
Yeah.
And
for Marcus Freeman, I'm saying that you're giving Kirby an extra week to prepare for Marcus Freeman, who has not been here before. So I agree with that as well.
Right. He also says Notre Dame's defense would make Georgia pay for the turnover issues. Notre Dame's offense doesn't turn the ball over like Texas. I'm not saying Notre Dame would beat Georgia, but we match up well strengths versus UGA's weaknesses.
I mean, I don't hate this. I don't hate the thought of it being March Madness style and have to be a play-in, but I mean that's what's.
You're going to Elks, yeah. Elks says that they're going to I hate it because then you're talking about a 17, 18 game schedule for some team. No.
Good point.
Right? Like I'm not by that. All right, so Cody and Fravel, we got to get to it here. We're going to come back to your super chats. Joe, remind me at the end of the show. You can send them in, but we're going to get to them at the end of the show here because we got to get rolling. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share to all those groups. If you're on Facebook, to all those social media pages. Congratulations is in order, my man. 12,000 subs here on YouTube. Y'all continue to sub, hit that notification bell. Why y'all like two Italians yelling at one another is beyond me. But we greatly, greatly appreciate it. It sounds like we hate each other. I promise you. Joe and I don't hate each other.
It's an Italian dinner, but with two microphones.
I've literally had my grandmother throw a thing of bread at me. I think I'm going to be okay.
Exactly.
Right. All right. So subscribe, notification, all that good stuff wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, we got to talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we come back, we break down the SEC Championship game and Big Ten right after. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50. That's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50 to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag. Betonline.ag. Oh, it's so fitting. It's so fitting to have Sam Ehlinger in the building with us to tell us that Texas is back, because the SEC Championship game, Georgia and Texas squared off part 2. Georgia is able to win in overtime. Joe, I thought it was a great game. I know people, I thought the first half was a little sloppy, but it was an absolutely great game. Your thoughts on how it played out with Georgia and Texas and Georgia winning the SEC?
Well, first of all, Blake, we got to bring up our good friends, the Texas fans, who were all in our comments this week. Oh, how they were so happy that we picked against them and how they think that we hate them so. Well, you make it a little easy when you attack us so aggressively. And then when you lost the game, oh, the fits, they were bad. Look, to move past that quickly, everything that we said, the biggest, most important part, Blake, about what we said was Quinn Ewers.
Oh, God.
His inability to not turn the football over against top opponents. I brought this up. Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Georgia during the regular season, multiple turnovers in those games. What does he do against Georgia in the matchup, the rematch here in the SEC Championship game? Multiple turnovers, multiple sacks. They need to start Arch. Let's save that talking point for a second here. But the deficiencies for Texas show up, and they start and end with Quinn Ewers. And credit to Georgia's defense for stepping up to the occasion when Gunner Stockton had to play, and him getting the job done and doing just enough to keep them above board and for them to win the football game. But that Georgia defense continues to play at a very elite level.
It always happens to Quinn that in crucial spots, turnovers happen. Now, a ball batting up in the air and Everett picking it off the way that he did, I'm going to be a little honest. That's kind of a freakish play.
It's
like
fair.
If the ball bats up in the air, okay. Here's the thing with Quinn. This time, I'm going to actually push back a little bit on you on this point. I'm going to push back in the sense of that you had 2 passes that were batted in the air and picked off, but early in the game, dude was on one, bro. Like, completely on one.
Yeah.
They were going man-to-man coverage. They were bringing the safeties down. We're going to stop the run. We're going to stop their little shifty stuff and things that they do in motion. They took away the screen game. And you know what Sark said? Beautifully. All right, you don't have anybody that can cover Matthew Golden. And we're going to run slants right in the middle of the field, and we're going to motion everybody around so that you got to realign. We're going to attack the middle of the field. The truth was, the first half felt like a domination to me. It really did, without any points. That's what I felt like was going on between Texas and Georgia. I tweeted this out during the game, and I tagged you in it, and I know we got a lot of things going on here, Joe, during games. If they don't get touchdowns, it's over, because Georgia's running game's about to get going. You cannot stay around and let Georgia play around with you and then think you're going to win the football game. But here's the thing, Joe. Outside the turnovers, Quinn was very bad in the second half. Very bad. He missed 7 passes in the first half. You want to know how many he missed in the second half? All of the rest of his incompletions. He went 27 of 46. The second half in overtime, brother, we was below 40%. He wasn't completing passes on third down. Hey, Matthew Golden had 6 catches in the first half. Why did you go away from him? Oh, and by the way, the big play in the second half that led you to that touchdown that you got, who caught the long pass down the sideline? It was Matthew Golden. More than Ewers. Joe, I think that they got out-coached in the second half, meaning Sark. I think Quinn did play bad, but here's the ultimate thing. We talk about it in the preseason, and because there's ebbs and flows during the regular season, we don't remember the reality of what we talked about in the beginning of the year. Here's that reality. Even though they dominated in the first half, one team ran for 141, the other ran for 31. They can't run the football. And I know that Quinn got sacked 6 times, but I'm going to bring that up last. If you don't have the ability on crucial downs, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, if you can't run the football, you will get beat. And that's the bottom line. And that's exactly what happened to Texas in the second half. Wisner had 19 carries, Joe, for 51 yards. 19 carries for 51 yards. That is 2 yards a carry. It was abysmal. Now, the sack yardage comes down because of Quinn being sacked 6 times. Let's get to that. I heard that it was a fluke that Texas's O-line got dominated the first go-around. Now, I know that Banks didn't play at left tackle, but, Joe, they had 6 sacks again. And we completely forgot how good Georgia was defensively. See, Georgia's problem had been all year. It was not on defense. Never really had been. Never had been their issue. Their issue defensively is they would get tired because their offense would keep throwing them back on the field over and over and over again, and they just got worn out. Maybe the depth, they did lack some depth in crucial situations. But the bottom line was they had to throw the ball 46 times. They had to drop back 56 times, mainly due to the fact that they couldn't run the football. Quinn had no help. So I agree with you on this. He turned the ball over, and those turnovers were crucial in Georgia coming back and taking over and ultimately winning the football game. But the bottom line, too, was Quinn didn't have a running game. He had multiple holding calls when he did complete things on 3rd downs. Joe, they had 11 penalties, did Texas. 11. They were not ready for the moment. Everything that we had heard about Texas, hey, man, they got to a playoff last year. They've been recruiting really well, developing very well. They were not ready for the moment. And when everything was up against the wall, when their backs were up against the wall, that soft schedule that everybody wants to talk about, what team was the number 1 in strength of schedule throughout the year? The Georgia Bulldogs. They literally just went through an overtime game last week. Joe, we were here on Sunday talking about Georgia and Georgia Tech and like, hey, man, you know what? They found a way to win, and they didn't blink. And here's another thing. You said it earlier, and it was off camera, but I did tweet this, so I'm going to give you credit along with me. The heart that Gunner Stockton showed reminded us of the mailman, Stetson Bennett IV. I
thought I said that. I thought I said that in the video earlier.
Maybe you did.
All right,
maybe
continue,
you did.
continue.
I thought you said it off camera. Anyway,
okay.
All right. He would not be denied. So when the next Georgia player gets arrested, stay with me, and people talk about team culture, you know who I'm going to point out? Gunner Stockton. You know who I'm going to point out? That when Gunner Stockton ran over a dude, the entire defensive bench got up and the whole game changed. So when that kid came in and showed that he gave a shit, and we want to talk about team culture and chemistry and being ready for the moment, one team was ready. So I know I threw you for a loop on the arrested thing, but how many times during the offseason do we talk about culture and we watch a kid like Gunner Stockton go in there and say, hell no, I won't be denied, even though, by the way, did you think that was a targeting?
Yeah. I mean, you can't, his helmet went flying off. Like you can't, he didn't have, the problem is I think the biggest thing that's not highlighted enough with talking about targeting. If you don't have to hit and deliver a hit that high, it's going to lead to a targeting call. Like he didn't need to hit him that high. He didn't. He could have wrapped him up around his waist and he could have dropped him and the play would have been done and it would have been over.
I'm not going to say, because here's my thing with targeting. I have no idea what it is anymore. No idea. I really don't.
Explain.
Very hard to explain. Joe, I thought the turning point other than Gunner Stockton, we need to talk about this too. Well, by the way, Matthew Golden and Moore went off. I just want to give them some flowers there. I felt like the turning point to me in the game was the fake punt. And not only that, an offensive lineman got to a technical pass in the play because it was a pop pass.
Isn't that Bobo's son?
Is it really?
Wait. Well, his last name's Bobo. I'm kind of making a little bit of a guess there.
I don't know. But who else would Mike Bobo trust if he's going to be creative? I know it's not him.
Well, he's not. Yeah, it's not him calling the play. But
who else would you trust? I don't know if there is another kid I would trust. But I did feel like that was the outright turning point and moment in the game. And I felt like after that, I never felt like Texas was going to win. Even during overtime, and they went to overtime, I never felt like they were going to win the football game.
So a couple of things. One, I still give credit to Texas, though, for being a really good football team. They obviously belong in the playoff. That's never something that we haven't said.
Went toe-to-toe with Georgia. You got to give them that, man.
I think they're going to blow the doors off of Clemson. I think that they are, again, a really quality football team. It's just hard to expect them to beat a team like Georgia in any adverse situation. They're going to find a way to win. You brought up Gunner Stockton, and I think that assuming that Carson Beck's injury is the level of severity that we had with Brock Purdy, that's what it's been compared to with his elbow, with the UCL. It looked like he couldn't even close his hand really the way that he was favoring it. So if he's unable to go, I actually kind of think that Gunner Stockton adds a different element to this offense. He's a good athlete. He's a good runner. He's not the same level of passer and decision maker as Carson Beck, but it just felt like that threat of him running opened up the offense just a tiny bit more. I don't have enough of a sample size to know, though, if Gunner Stockton is strong enough of a decision maker that he's not going to have more turnovers than the one interception that he had in this game. And in the same vein that I brought up in my introduction, they need to turn to Arch. Texas needs to turn to Arch Manning. Look, I can't keep talking about Quinn Ewers making mistakes. Did he have a bunch of big plays and did he throw for over 350 yards? Yeah, he absolutely did. But did his one of his turnovers cost him the game? Did the 6 sacks that he saw where he couldn't escape the pocket, did that cost him the game? Yes, it comes into it heavily. At the very least, Arch Manning should be coming into the game more often and should be getting more touches. They need to implement him as a runner because right now it feels like Quinn Ewers is an anchor. And if they want to go on a run, I feel like Arch is their best opportunity to do so.
Here's the problem. I don't disagree with you. I think it's highly unfair to turn to him right now.
Why? Because you're throwing him into
a situation that I don't know if he's ready for. I really don't. The one thing about Quinn, man, he has seen a lot of football. And look, this just isn't the game for me, really, if I'm being real with you. It's just not the game for me to stand on that hill because you got 2 fluke interceptions. He's got to throw the ball 50-plus times, okay? Another thing in that, Joe, he has no run game. They can't run the ball with Arch either. Now, the only way that they could do it, I mean, Arch did come in. I mean, their best
for one play. They brought him in for like a couple.
No, they brought him in for 3 plays.
Okay, that's not enough.
3 plays. It's not. You're right. It's not. The longest run, the second longest run that they had on the day was, remember the 4th down where they went for it and the ball was snapped in between Arch's legs on a quarterback.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
So I'm not, you're not wrong, man. Like, you're really not. I don't think Quinn can lead you to where you need to be. He can't. I also don't think that the team is bought into him completely. I don't. I see the reaction when Arch Manning goes in the game and the spark that those guys have versus when Quinn is in there. I do. And I know that – I don't know, man. If you did, I just don't think it's fair to make him a starter or move to him in a playoff. It just feels wrong.
I don't think that they would do that and that they would make the change for what you're saying is very true. But in a vacuum, it just feels like that Arch Manning should be the starter. Like, it just does not feel to me that Quinn Ewers is giving you the best chance to win. And you are right. The inability to run the football is a problem, and that definitely completely hurt them in this game. Hopefully they can get healthier along their offensive line, and Kelvin Banks can come back for this playoff run.
Well,
but
it doesn't matter if Kelvin Banks is there or not. If you face a team like this, you're still getting dominated. And here's the thing. I told you early in the week. What did I start off our Texas take with? My Texas take was they've played 12 weeks. 12 games. I have no idea who they are. I have zero clue on who they are.
I still have no idea what they are, if I'm being honest.
Me either. Moving to Georgia. Joe, I love what I see from Gunner Stockton. People are overreacting, in my opinion, look, he needs to get better as a thrower. I'm not going to deny you that. He still went 12 of 16. his decision making. I'm going to be real with you. His decision making was pretty elite.
Minus the pick. Minus
the pick. It was 15 of the 16 throws that he had in the second half. He was making the right decision over and over again. The kid knows what he's saying. I mean, it happened. There's a reason he completely went 12 of 16. Mm-hmm. So, look, man, he adds a whole different element. He only ran for 8 yards. Boy, that was the longest 8 yards in the history of 8 yards. Because the quarterback draw, both of them, really, where he picks up big chunks of yards. I mean, it's a big deal. Got the whole run game going.
Well, he finished with 26.
I thought he finished with 8.
No, he finished with 26. Okay. 6
Why
carries for 26 yards. Well, that's what I'm here for. We're here to spot each other.
Okay.
We missed something. No, he had 26. But I still think to kind of
never mind.
Just to close out the thoughts on him in this game, I wouldn't count out. This is not a Brock Glenn, Tate Rodemaker situation. I know Florida State fans want it to be, but it's not. I'm not counting out Georgia.
That was a whole horrible argument.
Yeah, I'm not behind that. I don't know how you can watch that and not think that Gunner Stockton still gives Georgia a legitimate chance, knowing that Carson Beck had multiple games this year with multiple interceptions of his own. I don't know how you can't look at this and think that Gunner Stockton gives them still a legitimate shot to win a national title.
Well, hold on. If any of those guys last year came in for Florida State and went 12 of 16 and it looked the way that he did running, we probably would be saying, who in the hell is this kid? But it's what we'd be saying. Brock Glenn came in and bro, Gunner Stockton had more completions in a half than Brock Glenn had in 3 games. I mean, like, calm down over here, right? I mean, like, calm down.
You're right.
Let's be real with one another. I mean, I'm sure he had more than 12, but it couldn't be a lot more than 12. So
I think you're right.
Last thing, Joe, the missed field goals is a big problem. That was a big problem for Texas. I feel like they play up and down the level of competition sometimes, man. Yeah. I really do. I really do. So something's off with them offensively. It might be Quinn. Who knows? All right. Let's get to the Big Ten title game here.
By the way, wait, quick. Brock Glenn, 8 of 21 for 55 yards. And then, really quickly.
12 of 16 for 71.
Well, but then Tate Rodemaker was 12 of 25 for 134 yards. So for any Florida State fans who want to hop in the comments, you do not have an argument.
Yeah, they were tagging us. They were tagging everybody. They got to get over that, man. They look so they got to get over it. All right. So the Big Ten title game goes to the team who is a new member in the Big Ten, that being the Oregon Ducks. What a hell of a game. Now, I'm going to be real to the Big Ten fans. I miss, as an SEC a person who grew up in the SEC, I miss Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson a little. I'm just going to be real with you. I don't like Gary as much sometimes, more than I like Herb Street, but I missed him. It was good to see a real, true, full game in there listening to them. But Oregon beats Penn State. Joe, your thoughts on the game?
This game was frustrating to watch for Oregon fans because the beginning of it, you're thinking, oh, my God, Oregon is just kicking the crap out of Penn State. They were playing truly up to the expectation that they were super balanced and dominant on both sides of the football. But Kotelnicki started to settle down a little bit more, and the run game started to kick up. And I really appreciated that Kotelnicki decided to start to work in Allar as a rusher as much as he did. And to see this finish for Katron Allen, who had 124 yards, and Nick Singleton, who had 104 on 10 carries, and then, as I mentioned, Allar 5 for 54. The fact that they understood this is our strength, we need to stop trying to get overly complicated with this. We're going to run the damn ball. And it worked. Oregon is deservedly going to be, and we're going to talk about this at the end of the show, they deserve to be one of the few teams that's considered in the best positioning to win a national title this year.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment.
Their offense is loaded with playmakers like we saw with the way that Tez Johnson played, that Jordan James played, the way that Dylan Gabriel played. But their defense has a legitimate concern for the way that they were unable to slow down Penn State's rushing attack. And I think that if Oregon gets upset and they get knocked off before the national title game, it's going to be because they square off with somebody who finally figures out how to run the ball and to get a stop here or there against Oregon's offense.
So to talk about Oregon before we get to Penn State, I would just say that, man, what a hell of a fight by both teams.
Yeah.
What a hell of a fight. And Penn State could have rested on their laurels and just fell down and said, no, we're not going to do it. You know, I see everybody talking about that way for SMU, like, hey, man, they could have just sat there and let Clemson run all over them. Well, what about Penn State? That game was on at the same time. What game were you really watching here? It was Penn State that kept clawing back. First, let me start out with them offensively. Joe, you know how much I love Dylan Gabriel, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he is – I mean, half of his completions went to Tez Johnson. So I get that. He had 22 completions, and Tez Johnson had 11 catches. But there comes a part where I'm just asking myself, are they peaking? Offensively, I feel like that they could be peaking. Now they got to get better in the run game. They must get better on third down. Must. Because Joe, every time I feel like that they need some short yardage late in the game, like it did against Penn State and Ohio State, they could not line up and run and get the yard, right? It's going to backfire on them. Offensively, Joe, I got to be real with you. I think they're peaking. I love Dylan Gabriel.
Wait, when you say peaking, though, can you like, are you saying that they're hitting a ceiling, or are you saying that they're about to get
not a ceiling? When I talk about peaking, I feel like they're hitting the rhythm. Like, for example,
okay, got you.
The rhythm that they went along with offensively yesterday was insane. I mean, like, you haven't really utilized the tight end, okay, in the last couple of weeks. I mean, you kind of did, you kind of didn't. But then you come out and you attack an area of weakness. You attack a scheme, and then you come back, and, Joe, they want to take it away from you. They want to take some of the wheel routes away from you. They open up the middle of the field, and Tez Johnson goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And no, I'm not talking about the cereal, right? Like, it comes down to, I felt like because Gabriel was making all the right decisions, man, it was a thing of beauty to watch. You don't score that many points over and over again and think that I'm just not going to come after you and say, hey, man, they look so crisp offensively. But here was the thing for me, too. Against a defense that had shown that they're not like that, right? Like, Penn State had not been giving up over 35 points a game. It's not like something that we had seen earlier. Go ahead.
Well, I just want to add, they only had one sack. Penn State only had one sack in this game.
Right.
That's the craziest part.
But see, the thing here is that you had a barometer of how the game could go when you watch them take on Ohio State. I thought that Ohio State receiving corps would be the one that ultimately would take over. They kind of did, I guess, in some instances. Joe, it's the Oregon wide receiver room and Tez Johnson that's like, no, I kind of thought that that's what Ohio State would look like in reference to how they're just out-athleting dudes. No, it was Oregon. Joe, they're out-athleting everybody. Everywhere offensively, they just got better dudes than you do. That's how I continue to feel about them offensively. We're going to talk about this in a moment, though. Defensively, boy, did I take an outright beating after week 7 from Oregon fans. You allowed a team to run on you for over 292 yards of rushing. They got beat up in the interior. They got their asses whooped. That's just the bottom line truth. And I know that we have a lot of people that are Oregon fans. I love you. I picked you twice last year to win this whole thing, and you let me down. I do love you. There comes a part where you got to acknowledge being run on for 300 yards offensively. That is insanity. Joe, of the 293, I mean, you have two guys and running backs that have over 100. So not only did they had almost another 100 yards rushing, not based off of what anything the running back duo did. That's very electric. That's insanity. So, Joe, offensively, I think they're hitting a ceiling. But man, their run defense had been leaky all year long, man, and it came to fruition in this one. But they were able to respond and hold on here. in reference to Penn State, here's what I'd say. I feel like they're just a couple players away. I really do.
Are you saying this season or just like in the future?
No, just in the future. I mean, like I've seen them go up against Ohio State and Oregon and throw punches. It's not like, Joe, last year what happened? They got physically abused by those teams. This year they're at the 1 yard line and they can't get in. And then this year they're trading punches. I mean, that's a 7-point game at the end there. And then they have a bad turnover and it was what it was. But they were throwing punch for punch. And I was like, oh, shit. Like this team's, I feel like if this team had a dynamic dude on the outside, it would be more even. And they didn't have that. They had Tyler Warren.
I see what you're saying, but I mean, I'm going to take this step forward to be complimentary of Penn State. I think that Penn State's the most quietly dangerous team in the playoff.
Oh, well, look at the teams they're facing off against.
Right. They were given an extremely easy path to deal with SMU, who is not equipped to match up with Penn State's defensive line. And then they get to beat the crap out of Boise State. I thought that this game, as you're talking about here, shows that they're more capable of competing in these matchups. That tells me in the playoff that they could pull out an unexpected victory. I don't know if that is at the current moment, but if they were to finish in the national title game, maybe lose in the national title game, or just even get to the quarterfinal, I would not be surprised. I don't look at them losing to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game and think to myself, oh man, that's so disappointing. Oh, same old Penn State. James Franklin can't win the big game. Yeah, maybe it's disappointing you didn't win the Big Ten championship game, but I feel like after the way that they ran the football and the way that Drew Aller made some good plays, didn't play his cleanest game, probably one of his worst games that we've seen in some time, I feel like this team has a lot that they can turn to and feel great about and to build confidence and to think to themselves, that's the best team in the country. Maybe we could get a rematch with them in the national championship game because we're able to go toe-to-toe with them, and they almost came back on them. This Penn State team is more legit than people realize.
Well, we'll talk about this during the entire playoff. They got SMU. They would have SMU, Boise, and then Georgia.
Mm-hmm. And
I
don't think it's improbable for them that they could beat Georgia. I really think that they could. I don't know if I trust James Franklin.
All right. Well, thank you for saying what I just said here, or I was going to say here.
Okay.
So if they can run the football in Oregon, they can run the football on a lot of teams in reference to talent. I'm going to keep saying this, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. You let teams continue to run the ball on you like that, you're going to get your ass whooped. I'm telling you, it's coming. You're going to get your ass whooped. You know what? Here's another thing. I know that Penn State was down. Could you imagine if they started playing a little slower and just lining up? Like if they would have gotten a lead early and the roles would have been flipped and they were running the ball like that and could have bled the clock. I mean,
well, that's what I'm saying. That's like they've got the structure of a team that can do it.
But they are a dude away. I'm serious. They are a dude away on the Joe. Their wide receiver, I think, was it Jermaine something? I don't remember. He was falling down on a 2-yard hitch route.
Are you talking about Amari Evans? Are you talking about
maybe 6? Whoever 6 is. 6 is falling down because he's losing balance when he's catching a hitch route. Like that's uncoordination.
I was just gonna say before we move on to this next game.
Okay.
I agree with you. If they could pull a big receiver in the portal, kind of like Oregon did this past cycle, but I think we can both agree Drew Aller needs to go back for another year. Like Drew Aller has a lot of good traits and is a really nice player, but imagine if he came back for one more season at Penn State, how much better he could get, and if they get some receivers.
Oh heavens. They
got to get him to stay.
Well, he's got to get himself to stay. I mean, NIL is a thing here.
Right.
So we'll see. All right. Joe, you want to move to the ACC here?
Yeah, let's do it.
The Dookie Bowl.
Just always causing problems. Jeez.
I had to take a shot there. All right. Joe, Clemson and SMU faced off yesterday in the ACC Championship game. Clemson, little old Clemson, little old Dabo, back in the playoff. Back in the playoff. They won the ACC. They beat SMU. Your thoughts?
Look, good job, Dabo. You won the ACC Championship game. I think there's a lot of applause going to Dabo for finishing this. I don't think it's earned. I really don't. You had SMU on their, like your foot was on their neck. You had the chance to end the game at around halftime. If you came out swinging in the third quarter, the game could have been over. You could have continued to run the football. You could have asserted your dominance in your physicality, but they were getting out coached in the second half. Kevin Jennings was super productive. They threw the ball 50 times in this game, but it just is really lame to me that is the outcome of the ACC Championship game. And to not talk about if they're deserving of being in the playoff field, I don't want to waste our time rehashing that because we already talked about it earlier. But the fact that Clemson had this chance to really prove themselves and failed to do so, and that SMU meandered about and had to scrap their way back into the football game, I don't feel good about either of these teams. Both these teams get knocked out in the first round. Kevin Jennings is a nice player, but they do not have the offensive line to protect him. And I'd be worried about the run game for Clemson because Phil Maffa looks seriously banged up, and he could not get going in this game. There's just so many problems for both these teams that I can't pinpoint just one in particular.
Here's the problem. Going into this game, you and I talked about SMU and Clemson, and I don't mind that they abandoned the run. Let me explain. You had the 96th team in the country in passing yards allowed you're going up against in SMU. And we talked about this at great length. I don't mind the play style. I don't mind the game plan, right? Because, you're talking about a team that couldn't stop teams that aren't finishing above 500 and don't have good passing offenses that are converting against SMU. The problem that I had is that you were doing it in the first half and you were converting on crucial third downs. It's why you were able to get 4 touchdowns with Klubnik. It's why Wesco was able to get going over the middle of the field and why he had 2 touchdowns too. The problem is the execution went to shit. It's the most Dabo thing ever, right? I feel like Clemson shows flashes of doing really good things like they did against South Carolina early, and then, oh no, downs the game and they wee their leg, right? I feel like I always see flashes and then something just drastically halts.
Yeah.
Remember the first half versus Georgia in week 1? Remember that?
Yeah.
And the first
they looked competitive.
I'm like, they better find a way offensively to get something going, but defensively, that defense is something. Joe, I don't mind the game plan. I just hated the execution. They got away from Brenningstool. So you have Brenningstool who's got 2 touchdowns, and in the second half, I'm like, where is Brenningstool, the tight end?
Yeah.
There's nobody on the field that's more freakish than that guy. And then secondly here's the thing about Clemson. Bro, I know you're talking about physicality going their way in the first half and bro, SMU's D-line physically dominated them in the running game. They got physically surprising. Dominated. And I will tell you this. I know Texas is not – I don't know if Texas has the best defensive line in the country, but if that is a weakness that you're going to – or a team that you're going to face, good luck, bud. Good luck.
Wait. Well, Texas does have one of the best defensive lines in the country.
I said I'm not going to say they have the best, but man, geez. Look – They still got run on yesterday by Georgia in the second half. Anyway, to your point.
That's in line with what I was saying here, and that's my biggest sense for both these teams in this game, is that Clemson got manhandled at times by this SMU defensive line. And we talked about coming into the game that SMU's defensive line was super competitive. They were super productive. It was the backbone of their success this season was the fact that they had those guys. Clemson's inability to move the ball on SMU and to protect Klubnik consistently in the second half makes me feel exactly what you just said. I do not think that they are going to have any success blocking against that Texas front that can be very smothering against mediocre offensive line units like the one that Clemson has. And then the flip side of this, SMU's offensive line was getting its ass kicked. And if it wasn't for Kevin Jennings, who
Just
is
being
super
an
elusive,
outright freak.
right, being a point guard out there trying to find ways to get the ball out of his hands before.
Well, that's a good way of putting him.
He plays like a point guard. Like,
Dude,
he totally does.
Okay, all right. Can I tell you who? So I had some friends over, right? And then some other guys that were talking in the group chat, and we're watching it on dual screen, the multi-view.
Yeah.
I swear to God, I said Jennings was Rajon Rondo peak Boston.
He knows how to distribute the ball. He
He
knows
does,
how to
dude.
navigate traffic and distribute the ball. But
The thing is, though, man, when he misses, he misses.
so
Right,
that's
like-
what I'm saying is imagine Abdul Carter chasing him down. Like
And
both these
Carter
teams.
can't catch him. Ain't nobody can catch that dude. If he's out in the open field, good luck catching him.
I think Abdul Carter can catch him. I think Abdul Carter's going to have an easy
All
time.
right.
I'm just saying all this to say that I do not think that SMU or Clemson are going to put up much of a fight in their first round matchups. They're going to be gone in an instant.
Here's the real truth. Both teams are probably around even. They just had 2 turnovers early. They weren't ready for the moment. They settled in. They came all the way back.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're probably about even, right? And so when I see SMU and Clemson being a little bit, I still think Clemson's the better football team. I do. Ultimately, I do. But I know that they're fun to watch. I love Rhett Lashley. I just don't – look, man, their secondary is abysmal. I mean, I know this is probably not what SMU's or Penn State, rather, what their ultimate game plan is going to want to be going into this game against them. But, Joe, I promise you, as God is my witness, Drew Aller better have 35 to 40 passing attempts in this game. They are that – brother, they let a wide receiver room from Clemson, who that has been a massive thing that we've talked about how bad they've been against better teams, is their wide receiver room is not great, and Wesco goes off. Bro, they're letting below average receiving rooms go off. That's the scary thing. And, buddy, I just got to tell you, Tyler Warren, if you can't cover some of these guys, okay, he's a different beast.
It's gonna be a bloodbath.
All right, you said it, not me, but goodness gracious. All right, we'll see. All right, let's wrap it up here. Joe, the Big 12 title game, speaking of blowouts, Arizona State coming out of the ashes, suspended. Jaden Rashada hurt. 2-10 last year? I forget their record.
Something like that. They were terrible.
Terrible. Kenny Dillingham going through all the things and struggles that he had, and all of a sudden, a year later, they've won the Big 12. They're in the playoff. How he found this kid Scattaboo is beyond me. But here's the thing, though. Kind of went exactly how we thought it was going to go, because we both talked about how bad Iowa State was defending the run, and Cam Scattaboo went full Mike Allstott early 2000s and was truck sticking dudes.
He was unstoppable, and that was like the big thing that I leaned on in previewing this game, and I stood on very heavily. They were not going to be able to slow down Cam Scattaboo, and he ran for the tune of 16 carries for 170 yards. If there is a team that many people want to argue doesn't belong in the playoff, that actually has a chance to put up a competitive fight, it's Arizona State. I think this Arizona State team has gotten better every single week, and I think that they deserve credit for the improvements that they've shown every single week. It starts and ends with Cam Scattaboo, but credit does need to be handed to Sam Leavitt, who, for a freshman,
we thought was dead.
He is so precise with his ball placement, and the fact that they only threw 17 passes and he goes for 211 yards and 3 touchdowns and 12 completions, 11 yards per play. This is
Leavitt went for 219. You're short him on 8 yards.
I have 211 what I'm looking at. regardless of the exact number. That offense is super explosive. I think it could keep them in a game in whatever playoff matchup that they see in the second round. Where the concern does certainly lie, though, is I don't think that defensively that they're stout enough to compete with an SEC or a Big Ten team.
219.
You did have 219?
Yeah, you're gonna fact check me. I'm gonna fact check you, sucker. All right, brother.
I guess he did have 219.
Brother, I'm sorry. This was an outright ass whooping. An outright ass whooping.
Plain and simple.
And the simple nature that Iowa State allowed Arizona State to run for 245 yards on them, knowing that it was what they were going to do, is why you never trust a guy that wears a hat with his bill like that. They were grossly outcoached. They were grossly outmanned. And Arizona State is a very fun football team to watch. Everybody loves Scatterboo. Everybody knows why they love Scatterboo. I mean, I love Scatterboo, if I'm just being honest. I love the way that he plays. Joe, this team's about to get blown out. And they play tough. They play physical. I feel like everybody on that Arizona State team loves the game of football. And that is what has propelled them. But, man, it was a clean-out ass whooping. There's no other way to slice it. There's no other way to dice it. They lined up and busted them up right in the face, and Iowa State couldn't do anything about it. So, good for them, man. I mean, the 245 yards is absolutely insane. The two fumbles that Iowa State had, too, were abysmal. They couldn't run the football, hardly at all. And Scatterboo went for 170 and 2 touchdowns. It's crazy, man. I thought it was going to be a closer game than this, Joe, to be honest with you. But
that's what I think is so eye-opening, is that how lopsided it was. And that's why I think that it's fair to give Arizona State. Now, I'm not saying give them a shot to win a national title. Like, I'm not that crazy. I'm not trying to make that argument here, but they're going to lose their first game. I'm just trying to make the case that, like, hey, they could show up and be competitive. They could show up and put up a nice little fight. That's probably the most of it.
Here's the problem. The problem for me is, since we're going here, Joe, they get a bye. The team
I know that I don't agree with.
The team that least deserves it. The least.
Can I throw this at you?
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that. With the way that Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier ran the ball on them.
Ran the ball on Texas?
On Texas.
Do you think Scatterboo could?
Not to the same degree, but do you think that they could have some success running the ball? And they can not to pull the upset, but to keep the game close?
I mean, could they? Yeah, because Scatterboo is a freak, and I'm not going to deny Cam Scatterboo from going off. But there are other games that were very competitive that they did win against lesser opponents. And Scatterboo, I know, was banged up early, but he wasn't banged up the entire season. Right? Like, he was still playing. So, look, man, I get what you're trying to ask me, but that O-line is not – I think Texas has got dudes. And I
don't disagree.
I mean, we're talking about Georgia running for 141.
Mm-hmm.
141. Like, it's not as – I get what you're saying. I know what you're saying. No, I don't. I really don't.
It's fair.
I mean, Etienne went 16 for 84 or 94. He had the one long run. Maybe he could. I don't know. Y'all tell us in the chat. Do you think Cam Scatterboo can go off on Texas? I know everybody's going to say yes because they hate Texas.
Right.
Y'all tell us in the chat. All right. So, Joe, do you want to get to the playoff and teams that we think are going to go on a national title run here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So the playoff rankings came out, or playoff rankings. I got to stop saying that after we've been saying it for 8 weeks. The playoff bracket came out today, Joe. We've already reacted to it. If you haven't watched it earlier, go see our reaction video to that. But there are a pair of teams that we think, and we're going to talk about here tonight as we close it out here, that could make a national title run. Some of them are going to be pretty obvious, but who do you got to start off with here?
I understand that there should be questions of concern for Oregon's run defense like we brought up, but I can't not pick Oregon as my team that I think is going to go on this national championship run. I have stood on every game this year for Oregon that whenever there's been spots where a certain position group or a certain facet of their game has not played up to expectation. I think of the Wisconsin game is a great midseason example where they could have dropped that game. They could have completely collapsed their momentum that they were building since the Ohio State win, but their defensive line stepped up. Against Penn State, their run defense was not playing well, and Tez Johnson in the passing attack, it stepped up, and they just flat out outscored them. They can win in so many different ways, and more specifically, they have very advantageous matchups against who they're going to square off with. Did they get a difficult potential first-round matchup against either Tennessee or Ohio State? Is that one of the more difficult situations? Absolutely. They got screwed over in that circumstance. But I think that they're too explosive for Tennessee to knock them off. And we already saw Oregon beat Ohio State, that I think that Oregon can beat them a second time. And then from there, they're good enough to beat Texas, and they're good enough to win in the national championship game. Having important playmakers at the most important positions is what makes Oregon such a legitimate threat. And I'm talking about Mateo Uiagalelei and Derek Harmon on their D-line. I'm talking about a Johnny Cornelius and Josh Connerly at both tackles, who only gave up 1 sack against Abdul Carter and company. I'm talking about Jordan James at running back, Tez Johnson at receiver. And of course, I'm talking about Dylan Gabriel, who is a fantastic player at quarterback. Every box is checked. They feel like they're the easiest answer to the question.
Okay, let me push back on that. Penn State just ran for 295 yards on them. Now, Oregon fans, let me start off by saying this. I love your football team. Please go watch our reaction to the Penn State game if you're watching this clip or whatever. I really like Oregon, and I agree with you. I think that they can go on a national title run. I'm with you. I really see that they can do it. You better hope Ohio State wins, because Tennessee's a very bad matchup for you. If Penn State can line up and run it on you, so can Tennessee. That's been their team. That's been their offense. Joe, I saw the around the 15th ranked rush defense in Georgia give up yards on the ground to Dylan Sampson. I've seen it. So I've seen them tested. I've seen them go on the road. I've seen them be in a hostile situation where they need to run the football, and it's what they do. Okay? You got a chink. And in week 8, Joe, you will remember we debated it. A couple weeks later, we started to agree on this after some things started happening with Oregon. In week 8, I came out and said, listen, man, your run defense is leaky. Every week, Oregon fans would keep coming back at us over and over again and saying, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. And I said, like I told the Miami fans, you better hold on. I'm telling you, you better hold on. It's coming. And then Penn State goes out there and runs for 295 on them. The bottom line is teams that can line up and run the football on you will give you problems, because if they start off a game early and they can get a lead on you, God forbid they get a stop early against you and they can play time of possession and run the football. There's a way to beat this football team. Every team has a chink in their armor this year.
Yeah.
I'm with you on Oregon, and here's a preface. I have my bracket right here. Oregon is in it, okay, in reference to the national championship game. I have Oregon in it. So to say that I don't like Oregon is going to be a lie. I have them in my national title game. But there comes a point for me that I do have a worry for them and what they've been doing in the running game the last 6 weeks.
I think those are fair criticisms, and to just close that out, no team's perfect. So you're right. You're right. What will catch them off guard is if they can't stop the run against Ohio State or Tennessee or against Texas. That is what it's going to come down to. They have the bodies, they have the D linemen to play better against the run. They just need to step up and actually play and perform better in those situations.
I swear to God, this isn't Tennessee. Take the T off the helmet. If I gave you the profile of the Tennessee team, it's what legitimately kept Boise in the game when they played. If we're being honest, it's what Penn State, it's how Penn State got back into the game and sustained of being in the game on how many yards they ran on you. Take the T off the helmet. You're probably, if you got to that situation, would beat Tennessee, I'd pick you to beat Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
The matchup is where it would concern me because they can run the football on anybody. They have shown that they can and will run the football on anybody. You got to get ready. All right.
Who's your pick?
Joe, I lied to you in pre-production when you asked me who is my team that's going to go on the national title run. Yeah, it's true. Because the team that I am picking to go on a national title run is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Oh, screw you. I knew you were going to say that. Give your real pick. You're the worst.
Oh, they're my real pick.
You can't say that with a straight face.
No, I cannot. And it's the Georgia Bulldogs, and here's why. Uh-oh.
Give me 1 second.
Oh, no. This man, no signal. I think he got hacked by Russia. I really do. The reason I have the Georgia Bulldogs going on a national title run here, all I said was,
okay.
I'll just wait to repeat here.
I was listening.
Look, I'm going to pick Georgia because I think that they have been the most tested. I know that they've had bumps in the road. When I look at the teams that they would play, I look at Notre Dame and just say to myself, I don't know if Notre Dame, even though I think that game will be very close, I don't know if Notre Dame can come over the hump. Then when I look at the next game that they would potentially play, it would be Penn State. And neither one of those teams have proven to me, whether it be Penn State or Notre Dame, that they could take on a Georgia this season, that they can take on a Georgia and win. Not to say that they can't take on a Georgia and beat them. They can beat them. They're easily could. I haven't seen Notre Dame tested like that. And I would want to see what it looked like when you faced off against a defensive line that can get after you like that. And you got in clear passing situations, and Riley Leonard's got to throw the football. Like, what does that look like? So then I think the same thing happens with me in Penn State. The more physical D-line one of the more physical D-lines that they face in Ohio State and USC, because even though we thought it was Oregon, man, Oregon did not play physical. Joe, they had issues offensively. So I know it's very chalky to go 1-2. Very. Who else am I supposed to pick here?
No, it makes the most sense. And I agree with your points that you're bringing up here with Georgia. And they're my second pick. And I think we're in agreement with each other overall on this. The matchups that they would likely face against Notre Dame and against Penn State, let's say that those matchups play out the way that we're expecting. Notre Dame has not shown, actually, I'm just going to be very broad with both these teams. Neither have shown an ability that if the run game is taken away, that they can turn to their passing attack. They just haven't. They haven't had to play in a situation where that has happened, and they've had to, spread the ball out and attack downfield. They just don't have the receivers. They don't have the passing production. As much as I would love for Notre Dame to go on a run here and to win a national title, and I think that there is a chance they could win the game if they play exactly like Georgia Tech did. But if Georgia is locked in and focused and playing to the potential that we know that they can play at in a playoff setting, and their defense is clicking on all cylinders, their secondary is going to be able to lock down the receivers for Notre Dame and the receivers for Penn State. I think, as you're saying here, it's very easy to go
really good matchup for Georgia. Let's just be real.
Right. It's easy to go chalk here, but at the end of the day, Georgia has the best path. They have the best matchups of potential opponents that they could see on a national championship trajectory type run.
I mean, other than Penn State, really. I mean, God forbid Georgia got knocked off. Then all of a sudden you get to a place where, what's going to happen at the bottom of the bracket here. Joe, and God forbid Indiana wins. And I'm being serious. Like, hypothetically,
I might not come on the show if Indiana wins.
Yes, you are.
I'm going to hide.
But Marcus Freeman's already taken, speaking of the Indiana Bowl, Marcus Freeman already taken shots. He says on head coach for Indiana, Kurt Cignetti, well, just want to let everybody know, and I'm quoting here, as I took a minute before the press conference and I Googled him.
I respect the shit out of Marcus Freeman for saying that.
It's raw fun and games until you get your ass whooped.
He's a completely different person these days, man. Marcus Freeman's been on one.
Fravel Ed says Alabama fans complaining when they knew what was at stake on the road in Norman gave up and let a trash OU team beat their rear ends. They showed they aren't deserving. Bama's 0-2 in hypothetical games. Well, they can't be 0-2 in hypothetical games because they didn't get to play. They weren't played.
The other part about this, I don't think that's wrong. Like, I don't think that's wrong to say that they still need, like, you can't lose to Oklahoma. You just can't.
Yeah, two things can be true at once.
If Ohio State, right, that's true.
Two things can be true at once. They can't lose. It's abysmal that they lost.
Let me throw this at, I don't mean to cut you off, but like, let me throw this at you. But what if Ohio State had lost to Penn State and then they lost to Michigan? They'd be out of the playoff field. If it's the same situation.
Well, who would you? Well, here's the I get your logic. Here's the problem that I have with that. I know I kind of want to take Bama out for a moment, for just a moment, because everybody is so focused in on Bama. I can make a stronger case for Ole Miss or South Carolina. That's the part that I'm trying to make. The part that I'm trying to make is South Carolina's losses are hoomst. They're not that bad. Oh, well, the head.
They got blown out by Ole Miss, so that's kind of what's killing them.
Well, regardless, Ole Miss has a loss, okay, that the LSU loss on the road that isn't as bad as Michigan at home. It's not. So, I mean, like, we have been arguing, yes, but I think that you agree. Here's the thing that, who was it? Elks? Joe, who did they play in the beginning of the season? By the way, I put this on Twitter. I should find it. Please, everybody, go quote me on it. It's on the Twitter machine.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know 2 weeks ago I gave Ohio State's schedule outside of Oregon? They were below 500 by 20 games, the teams that they had played.
All right, that's fair.
By the way, who were Vandy's 6 losses? Georgia State, horrible. Who else were they? Texas, LSU, South Carolina,
Tennessee.
The five of Vandy's 6 losses came against ranked opponents. So if you legitimately want to talk about,
I think we're going a little deep in the.
No, I'm just saying. We're saying Vandy was 6-6. Okay, they faced 5 top 15 opponents. Vandy.
Yeah, I just think that logic requires. Like, I don't disagree with it. And I think that a lot of people that were paying attention to college football understand that the Vandy loss is not that bad. I just think it requires a lot of explaining. Is all I'm saying.
It's not that bad. Not when the runner-up Texas won by 3 and almost had to go into overtime with the same team.
All right.
I mean, here's the thing for Ohio State. Last thing I'd say. Remember when you got blown out by Purdue and you still got in the playoff? Remember that? Joe, you remember that?
It's fair. It's a fair point.
Yeah, Cody McGee with a $10 super chat says college football committee screwed this up so bad. Think South Carolina should have gotten in with their schedule that they had. Thoughts on Scott Frost back to UCF?
The problem with the South Carolina thing, and we kind of just talked about this, is that They don't have the head-to-head wins over the teams that were ranked ahead of them, and you have to favor the committee has to favor and factor in the teams that beat them on the field. Like that has to get brought up. It's just a convolution of a chain of events.
You're right. We can't go so far that head-to-head can't matter.
Yeah. Scott Frost at UCF is so chaotic, and I freaking love it. They could suck as soon as he comes back. I have no idea if this is going to work, but I love it. I mean, this is perfect.
What if he starts winning?
This is why I love it. This is why it's so volatile. It's either going to be amazing.
Well, you know what it's going to mean. You know what that's going to mean. With Matt Rule's struggles, Nebraska might be cursed.
That's a good point.
I mean, it might be cursed. Who knows? In reference to Scott Frost, I would say go be fun. Go be what you were a couple of years ago. Go be fun. Yeah. Oh, and guess what? Now you would get in the playoff. Remember those hypotheticals with Scott Frost? Now you would get in the playoff.
Exactly.
Win your conference. Trojan Fight with a $5 super chat says Riley Leonard is 86th in passing yards. Notre Dame doesn't throw because they can't throw.
Learn ball, man. They run the ball better than most teams in the country. Go worry about keeping your recruits and getting some recruits from California. The USC fans, like you guys stink. I don't want to hear it.
Joe, he ain't wrong. He ain't wrong.
He's okay. I get that, but how many teams have quarterbacks that are fantastic runners like him and then run the ball really freaking well? And they've got two really good running backs. They've got one of the best backfields in college football. That's why they've gotten this far.
I will say this. I do think you have the best offensive coordinator in the game that nobody wants to mention.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And yes, I'm 1,000% biased off a friend. $5 super chat from Cody. One more question. Is Mike Gundy fired or still employed? He's still employed. Cody also says, is Bourbon Bill going to North Carolina with him being interviewed?
The Gundy thing sounds like he's coming back. I believe
he just hired Ty Grantham as his DC.
Yeah. I love the idea of Bill Belichick at UNC. I think he's going to do great there. And I love the idea that apparently he wants Steve, his son, who's the DC at Washington, to come in, be his defensive coordinator, and then take over the job in, I don't know, like 5, to be named the coach in waiting. I like the whole circumstance. I like the idea of having more pro coaches in the game of college football, because I think that there's plenty of college coaches who are getting turned away from the professionalization of it. So if there's more professional coaches that want to embrace,
that's a really interesting point. I didn't think about that. I'm not
trying to I'm just saying that. Like, I would like to have more. We have coaches openly complaining, like Dabo. I'd rather have somebody who's like, all right, Bill Belichick, who is the king of nickel and diming shit. Yeah, now you want to do your hood thing. He's the king of nickel and diming rosters. He would be perfect in college football.
We're on to Cincinnati.
I wonder if they should schedule Cincinnati as their first game.
We're on to Cincinnati. All right. We got one more here from JT Brown, then we'll get out of here.
Okay.
JT says, I can't believe it's a controversial take that playing in the same conference as a bunch of NFL caliber teams isn't the advantage you think it is. I'm looking at both Alabama and South Carolina here. Can you explain what he's trying to say here?
I can't believe
it's controversial take that playing in the same conference with a bunch of NFL caliber teams isn't the advantage you think it is.
Is it a shot at the SEC or agreeing with the SEC? I don't
know. There's two contradictions here. I don't know.
Well, thank you for the super chat. I don't understand.
I don't know. He's got two cants in there. I don't know what he's trying to say. Look, man, here's the truth. I ran a poll on Twitter today, and people disagreed with me. I'm okay with standing on a hill. I'm okay with having an opinion that nobody agrees with. Joe, the shots that you and I take on social media every day, we're okay with them. It's not the real world.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. That's a very oddly worded question, but thank you for the super chat.
Very much. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. On to Cincinnati. Peace.